Where there's a whip, there's a way. Where there's a whip, we don't want to go to war today.
Hey everybody, welcome for season 2, episode 1 of Rings of Power. If you've been following us, I know you're super hyped, super excited for joining us for the inevitable review of season 2, episode 1. Well, season 2 in general. If you've been following along, we're not super fans so far. I know there has been some mild, I don't know how to classify it. Hope that season 2 might swing it around.
There was some hope there.
There was some hope there.
Mild, yes.
Silver's late. Silver will be joining us when she's done. I've texted her. I texted her question mark and she said almost.
Kaiju monsters are not known for their being on time.
For their being on time. That being said, we have much to go through. And I'm disappointed Silver isn't here for at least whatever we are going to cover in the meantime.
For my weeping?
For your weeping, for Ross's heaving cries. And to double
Before
check
we
to make
start,
sure. Oh, please.
On the episode, may I mention some things I noticed as I navigated to my Amazon Prime Video app to watch the latest episodes of the Rings of Power, Amazon Prime's Rings of Power. So I booted it up, and of course it shows the big banner. And at the time, this would have been Thursday. This would have been Thursday evening, so very, very early Friday morning. In reality, it had Rings of Power #2 in the U.S., which made me immediately go, "Wait, what's #1?" After I finished the first 2 episodes, and I went back to the main menu, it said #1. But the other thing I noticed, because there was a rumor, I don't know if you guys remember, I know Rhett does, but Jason, I don't know if you remember, there was rumor back with the first season to they were counting autoplay seconds, minutes, whatever, into the watch time of the first season.
You're absolutely right.
Well, wouldn't you know what I saw on my Amazon Prime? But because normally they have like the tile of the show, and I was on that, and I have the autoplay feature disabled on everything I can because I hate it. Because you'll be scrolling around and it'll just start playing super loud and it irritates me when I just want to read the little blurb about it. So I have it turned off and everything. But there was a special little tile where Amazon is just playing Rings of Power. They're just playing little bits of it. And okay, like it's beneath some other things. It's like its own little special, like in the middle of the page banner on the app where it's just going. It's probably just a trailer, but it made me wonder if you sit there long enough, will it start playing? And anyway, just a thought that came to my mind made me wonder if they're trying to boost some watch it minutes. But anyway, that's why I wanted to mention that right off the bat for posterity's sake. That how funny it is how they set up for this.
Oh, by the way, do you enjoy my dynamic background?
It is very dynamic, and I feel like I'm in the South. I mean, Mordor.
Yeah, the text change, the font.
It did.
The new font has been uploaded,
and it is a creepy font.
It's a creepy font. I like me a dynamic background.
Love it. Looks good, genuinely.
Anyway, we're here excited to talk about the show, analysis, conversations about the plot, etc., etc. It's going to be super hyped. At any rate, the episode 1 begins. We have a crown. Looks to be presented. They're slow walking it through a group of orcs. I have to be very careful because Amazon is very aggressive when it comes to the copyright claim. And the crown is being presented to a hot Sauron elf man.
A slightly different actor, Sauron man.
Yeah. I've seen him in something. What is it, Jack Lowden? He is in Slow Horses. Slow Horses is a good show. He's a good actor. Not a good show for him, but
money too.
I'm glad he's giving Amazon money. So it looks like they're presenting
Paycheck
Morgoth's
expensive.
crown, and they have this they have this conversation where he. So I have immediate issues with this first scene. All right.
Do you?
So-
Oh, good. I do too.
Okay, so he's presented with the crown that's implied it's Morgoth's crown, and it sounds like Morgoth just
Right.
died, so we must assume this is in the past. Morgoth, the great evil, he's
Right.
basically Satan. And Sauron feels it necessary to, I guess, give a persuasive speech to the orcs, as if he needs to convince them, as if they have
Yeah.
opinions and individuality and political leanings and may or may not vote for his candidate, Sauron the Great, I guess.
Like they don't know him. Like they should already know him. He's
He's
been
li-
around. He's the lieutenant of Morgoth. Like why would
Yes.
they not know him?
Or why would they not? Why would he have to convince them? He's literally the Dark Lord. He is the heir apparent. Why would they just not go, oh, well, we're following this guy? Why would they have to be like, well, I'm not going to trust this Sauron that literally has been leading the armies for how long at this point?
You know, this
I
reminded me
mean-
of two things. This reminded me, first of all, comically, it reminded me of Shrek, the Farquaad speech.
Yes.
Many of you will die, but that is
I had that same thought.
like literally because he like says that. Number one, and number two, what it should have been. Hey, Rhett, you watched the Pacific.
I did, yeah.
Do you remember when they're on Peleliu and their captain, who they call Ak, gets killed? Because he just goes up a hill and they hear gunshots, and then they come back down, and the lieutenant, who was underneath the captain, just goes, Ak's dead. And they bring out his body covered in a blanket, which is symbolic in the show, but whatever. And they and that's it. That's all they needed to say, and they just follow the lieutenant now.
Yep.
But that's all this should have been. Like, why are you making a Farquaad speech? First of all, these orcs, they're orcs. They don't
Yeah.
need that. They're dumb. Like, I don't know
No.
what's happening. Like,
Well, this is
all you got to
this
do is
is a
tell them you're going to smash
precursor.
and crush.
This is a precursor to presenting the orcs in a different way, which is
Yeah.
really bad.
It's so
but-
stupid. It's so dumb.
It is. It's so terrible. It's one of the things that I obviously this is for the other episodes, but it's like we don't want the orcs to be just misunderstood. They're bad guys.
Yeah, they are unfortunate, but they are not redeemable. They're not like that's not
No.
like my God. They are unfortunate in the way that you feel bad for a dog that's been in a fighting pit. That doesn't mean I want it to live in my house. I'm sorry you got hosed, but that's not my problem. Like,
It's
go
still
away.
a
You're a
psychotic
horrifying
dog.
monster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Like I
orcs
don't
aren't
want you
gonna
around.
the orcs aren't gonna become civilized just because they're misunderstood, and if only man, if only they would have their own country and they could deal with man one on one, we come to common grounds. No, the orcs still want to eat humans. Terribly
They-
sorry, that's not gonna.
They want to
you can't.
destroy it.
Yeah, you
Well-
can't negotiate with orcs. I'm sorry.
Well, let me remind you that Tolkien literally classified the orcs as evil in nature. They are not
Yeah.
misunderstood. They simply are evil. They're evil naturally. They have evil motives. They want to do bad things.
And you know what this speech also reminded me of is
Go
when
ahead.
Sauron's like giving a big speech from the tower. But I think like if that's the case, if that's what they're going for, then they completely misunderstood that scene. That's him amping up his new creations. Who, by the way, they intercut with him giving that speech, like cutting down into the Uruk-hai, and they're just like screaming and like getting amped up, like they're going to go onto a football field.
yeah, he's hyping that.
They're getting amped up to go kill. Like he's not
Right.
convincing them to. They already work for him. It's done. It's over. He got.
Well, Saruman isn't giving a speech going, when we finally defeat the people of Rohan, each Uruk-hai will be given a plot of land so that he can raise his family in peace.
None of that. It's like we're gonna jack
Oh,
these
it's like-
people up. Let's go.
There will be man flesh tonight. Ah.
Yeah. Like, what the-
Let's murder.
My God.
Yeah.
oh.
Well, here's a
Lord.
line that gives you an indicator, sort of the motives. He is literally telling them, you have to follow me. You have nowhere else to turn because the Valar will never forgive you. You can't turn to the humans, you can't turn to the elves or the dwarves. No one will like you. Which is a precursor to setting up the motive for Adar to wanting their own land for the orcs, hence the motivation to create Mordor, which Adar is motivated to do. See, men will never look upon you with anything but horror and disgust. So basically, you're outcasts. You have nowhere else you can turn. And one of the orcs goes, I don't like what he's saying. I have a dirty British voice. Because all of the orcs have like very, like gutter Brit, like accents.
Oh, yeah.
Like they all just crawled their way out of the ditch in Oliver Twist.
It's Dickensian in nature.
It's Dickensian in nature. Yeah, it's Dickensian. Stop saying that word. I don't think you know what it means. Anyway, he tries to attack Sauron, and it goes poorly, and Sauron murders the crap out of him. So Adar is like, as the father of orcs, I guess. He goes and grabs Morgoth's crown, and he goes to put it on his head. And he flips it over, and he stabs Sauron. Hence turning this hole into a giant orc mosh pit of murder and chaos as they all just start yanking the crap out
Then it
of
turns
Sauron.
into a prison shanking.
Now, lest I remind you, Sauron is nigh the height of his power because he's never been damaged or killed at this point. He is an extremely powerful being, and he basically gets prison shanked by like 8 orcs who show up and just start stabbing the crap out of him.
Just some guys, you know.
Well, this
to
just
kind of put this in perspective, you have 2 celestial type god tier beings in Middle Earth. One are the Valar, who are actually the gods, and then you have the Maiar, who are just a step below them. You could classify them as like archangels or demigods. And this is what Sauron is.
Yeah.
He is at the level of almost attaining godhood, and you think that, you know, a bunch of orcs and an elf who is twisted and warped are going to be able to take him out? No, that's not happening.
Remember when he fought and the beginning of Lord of the Rings, and he's literally
bring that up
and just murdering hundreds of elves in one swing. In the lore, he kills some of the greatest among the people of Middle Earth. He kills Gil-galad. He kills Isildur's dad, Elendil, who's like one of the greatest warriors of Middle Earth and is like 7 feet tall. Sauron just wrecks him,
mows him down like it was nothing.
But a bunch of like Oliver Twist British orcs just prison shank Sauron. I guess he's not as persuasive as he thought he was. Now, I know we're joking about all of this, but the premise is that why would he need to convince orcs? They would just follow him. Whereas in the show's logic, in the show's storytelling, the orcs have their own personality, and that there is a motive, as we're going to see down the road, that Sauron actually has a plan to control the orcs. Because apparently he just can't naturally, which is a strange concept.
Imagine having your charisma stats so low you can't convince an orc to follow you.
Well, that's the stupid thing. That's the stupid thing about this. We all know from the lore that Sauron was actually uber persuasive.
Yeah,
people loved him and followed him because he appeared so much like a being of light. And people wanted to be around him, wanted to follow him.
By the way,
should have been no problem for him to rile these orcs up and to get them on his side.
By the way, this makes Galadriel and Celebrimbor, who we'll talk about further in these episodes, by the way, look like even bigger morons. Orcs would follow him, but they got fooled.
Well, it can't be understated that this diminishes the threat that Sauron has. If he's so easily killed, it makes him seem like a chode. Like he's not a threat. he's not he's not this great evil anyone should be worried about. Like a bunch of orcs can shank him in his own tower. Basically, at the end of Sauron gets shanked, and he explodes in a visual representation, much like we've seen in other ways when he died at the end of Return of the King and at the beginning of the Fellowship, where he died. He like bursts with energy, and he just kind of goes away. Because we've seen that before, and they're like, well, visually, we're just going to lean into that.
Not without turning the entire north into a frozen wasteland.
Yeah, it made me think, because this is the castle, or like the area that Galadriel shows up in the first season, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so can I just a slight derail? This two things. So this implies that he made the North frozen wasteland by his death, which is hilarious. Number one. Number two, now, as I had mentioned at the beginning of earlier on, that the show isn't just fighting with the lore that Tolkien has. This is fighting with the own internal logic of the show. Because in the first season, Adar talks about when he's being interrogated after his forces get defeated initially by the Númenóreans, that he was up there in the north and he was doing these experiments on orcs and it was awful, and so many of them had to die for his ideas, and I didn't like that, and so I betrayed him, right? Well, when the hell's that happening? Because it did, like, this makes it seem like Morgoth just died, and before all homie Sauron can even take over, he's dead. So when did this happen? Was this happening when he was lieutenant?
Like, it had to have been.
It's implying that, like, when he says many of you will die, that's what they're talking about, is his weird experiments to gain power over the flesh. But they haven't shown it to me, and which further makes it confusing when apparently it's thousands of years go by here in a little bit, as Rhett will get into. I mean, as Rhett has mentioned over and over again in season 1, and unfortunately, it seems like we're going to talk about over and over again in this season, time and space mean nothing in this version of Middle Earth, and it is infuriating.
Well, they mean something when they need them to. If it becomes an inconvenience, they completely ignore it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another insert shot we got to do, or but we only have 8 episodes, or we need it now. It's like, well, whatever. They just showed up, I guess. Like, oh, gotcha. It's just infuriating. Like, now it's arguing with itself. Like, season 1 doesn't agree with season 2 doesn't agree with season 1. It's just crazy.
It feels like there is a lot of, hey, season 1 wasn't working, there was a rewrite. Like, changes were made. So Sauron, as we've seen in previous iterations when he's died, where he turns into a evil, like I don't know, smoke monster or a great eye, or when he goes incorporeal, we've seen this happen before. In Rings of Power, apparently turns into Flubber.
He's a Gooman.
He turns into Venom, the symbiote.
The Leech Man from Resident Evil 7. Oh God, what's that other? Did you ever see a game on Steam called Carrion, where like you're going around eating people as a big horrible like thing goo monster?
Danganronpa?
Yeah, sure, why not? But it's just like they just had this idea, and literally, there's a game where you look like it's like a mobile game that you get ads for all the time, where it looks like a venom creature eating things and growing and gaining power.
Oh yeah. I've seen that.
Yeah. So they got this idea from a mobile game ad. Like, this looks so stupid, and it's like wrong. Like, it makes his power seem so much baser than it should be. He's an angel.
Well, he is a force of nature.
Yeah.
This makes him look like a chode. And by the way, so this scene is the only indication of the passage of time. Goo monster laying in puddle, stalactites. So this is perhaps giving us an impression that 1,000 years has passed, assuming that this is the whole time Galadriel's been searching for him.
Yeah.
as best as I can tell. And the only reason why it gets out of here is we just happen to get a rat by the pool, and he's like, "I'm gonna eat this rat," and he gets
Gonna eat the
bigger.
rat.
So
Gonna eat the centipede.
I guess his power is based upon his ability to consume things around him, and he just gets bigger. Why haven't we seen
Yeah.
that Sauron? Why isn't he just running around consuming everything we can and turning into like a
Maybe that's how he got so
300-foot
big in
goo monster?
Maybe that's how he got so big in the Fellowship of the Ring at the very beginning.
He's eating a
At
lot
the
of
War of
rats.
Three Armies. Yeah, he's just been eating a lot of people. Maybe there's some orcs in him, and that's how he got so tall.
Me and Ross talked before this came out after we had seen it. And I get the impression that this show has a lot of winks and nods to other things. And this
Yeah.
whole scene of him
Yes,
being
yes,
recluse in a cave and crawling out reminds me a lot of basically the Outcast of Smeagol, where he goes Gollum in Return of the King. That basically this is him being outcast in his misery, and him finally crawling out of the hole in the ground where he's been hiding the whole time. It reminds me of this
Yeah.
visually and
Yeah.
how it's shot, and it gives you that impression.
This particular scene didn't give me that impression, but there were other scenes that I did feel that for.
Yeah, it did to me. Like with the quick cuts between him between the goo monster eating things and like it's very I mean, not
He's
when he
been-
flops out onto the snow, I guess, but
Well, but it's like he's been betrayed. He's in a pathetic
Yep.
state. It's almost a reverse of Gollum crawling up into the mountain to hide. He's finally
Yeah.
crawling
Yeah.
out of the mountain. The
Yeah.
shots feel very similar. Anyway, he slops out and then rolls himself down the snowy tundra
Well,
until we just shut up, Ross. Until we just happen to get a cart to roll by, and he gets stuck on the cartwheel, and he eats this lady, and now he's
No.
man size.
now he's back to being Charlie Vickers, baby.
He is upgraded. And Sauron's
Hey,
back, baby.
Oh, as I'd mentioned on the podcast before, my girlfriend is a big Lord of the Rings fan, big Tolkien fan.
Uh-huh.
And I told her about this scene, and she's like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Doesn't that seem wrong for Sauron? Like, she's like, "Yeah, he should just be like, it should just cut and have like maybe a nice sweeping movement into a town or a city somewhere, and you should just have a random face in the crowd turn and look at the camera in like a knowing way, like, oh, hey, there's Sauron again. You see, you can't kill him.
No,
He'll just come back."
Been awesome.
That would have
he's
been so
immortal.
much more interesting.
That would have been so much better. Yeah.
Just a thought from a random woman who has no degree in cinematography or filmmaking, but whatever. Like, way more interesting and cool than the goo monster in
Well,
broad daylight.
I can tell you that what it feels like they're trying to do is they're trying to present like,
Oh no!
is she here?
Yeah.
He's here.
I don't have my
Hey.
doom. I don't have my doom. Oh, look who decided to wander right in here. Look who have arrived. It's Silver. We're
My
talking
man.
about Sauron the Goo Monster.
Our own goo monster has
Yeah.
arrived.
Our own Goo Monster has arrived.
So I found what this reminded me of. There is actually a monster from D&D called the Larval Mage, which is basically just a mage that's made up of just worms. The whole
Yeah.
body is it's humanoid in shape and I'm like, yep, there we go. We've got our Larval Mage there.
I think it's more just to represent it's black and gooey because he's evil. Like, that's just really
Yeah.
as far as they thought.
Evil!
No, it totally is. I just when I saw the thing, I'm like, didn't I see that monster in D&D?
No, yeah. I saw that monster in RE7.
I saw
it
that
in,
monster
Prey
in Venom.
and
Yeah.
Venom.
Spider-Man 3. The Search for Spock.
Shalom.
Shalom.
Venom 3 is just Halbrand. Sauron.
Well,
Let there be Sauron.
Let there be Sauron.
Well, it feels like we've seen what Sauron looks like when he goes incorporeal, and it's not a goo monster. It's not flubber.
Right.
Thank God. And
But as I was going to get to before Silver interrupted us with her presence, from what I can tell, what the story's probably trying to do is he gets betrayed and killed, and this is partially a motive for creating the ring and putting his power into it so that he can't disappear like he did before, because the ring will always preserve sort of his status. Like, it feels like that's what they're trying to do, but they could have presented it as not goo monster.
He just goes Wraith.
Yeah, or whatever. He becomes a shadow.
They already basically did it when he died and had that huge light shoot out the top of the palace and everything turned white. I mean, there you go. That's him disincorporating. We don't need to do this blood drips down and he turns into some goo monster. We don't need that.
Yeah.
But I love
we
the
all
goo
know
one.
Sauron is a bloodborne monster.
It's true. Anyway,
the other thing.
Go ahead, Jason.
Actually, go ahead. I think I'll bring it up in just a second.
Well, so we're
'Cause
supposed
it
to
fits more when
feel
we get up here further.
we're supposed to feel sympathetic for him. That this is almost a Gollum type moment where he gets betrayed. I mean, we get an emotional, tear-filled eye moment of him sitting by the fire, being upset that they turned on him.
Right. But
this is supposed to be the impetus for his motive.
We don't sympathize with him. He was putting
The
himself
show
up
wants
as
you
the
to.
Dark Lord.
The show
know.
wants you to.
Regardless of what the show wants here.
But this isn't the Sauron from the movies. This is pathetic Sauron who thinks he can do good and convince Galadriel to join him. And he's butthurt that a bunch of orcs didn't listen to his inspirational speech at the Holiday Inn. It's one of those masculine, like, motivational speeches where he's like, go get what you want. He's Tom Cruise in Magnolias.
Many of you will die.
Well, his feelings are hurt. His fifis have been hurt.
Oh.
And he runs into this guy. And
Man, I
he's like,
just love that every representation of humans is grub people. I realize these people are fleeing destruction, but like, my God, can we see anyone other than the Numenorians be regal? Where are these 9 kingdoms they're going to give these rings to? It drives me insane. We still have the problem of world building in this season.
Yeah, I was trying to figure that out myself earlier, but this is kind of where I wanted to come in. It seems also that the reason that they're doing this with Sauron's character is because of this conversation that he has with this guy right here, where he tells him, "Don't go that way. Orcs are over there." He said, "You should come with us." And he said, "But I've been terrible things." He's like, "We've all done things we aren't happy or we aren't proud of. The thing that you need to do is do something better today, and then just keep doing better things until it becomes you." And it's like, and this I think is supposed to be our thing where, so Sauron has the opportunity here to go good. He could have been a bad guy, but he could totally go good here. He could redeem himself. It's like, no, that's not how this works. Sauron's the Dark Lord. Let's be internally consistent here.
He's misunderstood. Well, the show wants the villains to be misunderstood. It wants the orcs to be misunderstood. It wants Sauron to be misunderstood. I realized from our perspective, he's supposed to be the big evil Dark Lord, the eye in the sky sort of thing. In this show, he gets prison shanked by 8 orcs and is kind of pathetic.
Yeah.
And he gets emotional about it and butthurt that they betrayed him and that no one's his friend. Literally, you could have that song playing with from Two Towers talking about how nobody likes you and everybody hates you. You know what I mean? Like, he's supposed to be a tragic figure, I think.
Yeah.
But this is the exact moment.
Fear him as well.
Yeah, well, that's the problem with fearing him is we don't. Anyway, he sees
don't.
the little pouch, and he's like, "Oh, look at that pouch! I'm gonna have it." So literally, he didn't lie to Galadriel when he said, "I'm not the king. I just stole it from an old man."
He's very honest about his about
Yeah.
himself.
Honest Abe, honest Sauron.
Honest
Honest
Sauron.
Sauron. He's a guy.
Known for his honesty. Anyway, he joins this group of humans who convince him not to run directly into the face of the orcs that clearly can defeat him easily.
And this
he
is
ends up
the
on a
other
boat.
thing. That conversation with the dude, he's like, there's supposed to be islands across the sea. It's like, actually, across the sea was Valinor, and that's about it.
Well, I'm assuming he's talking about Numenor, but it's like, would you guys not know Numenor? Also, again, where's the Numenorian settlements all up and down? Because the whole reason there was 9 kings is because they were the heirs to Numenor.
And there were
like
multiple
when
the
kings
Roman Empire
on
fell.
Numenor.
Yeah, I just God, it's all so infuriating. Like the humans are just sort of like these listless refugees everywhere except Numenor. Like they're just scratching in the dirt, doing nothing. It is infuriating. It comes down to, well, they're walking around in ruins that were elven or human all throughout the Lord of the Rings. It's like, yeah, ruins from this period. Like you show me the majestic places that these people built. Like I really, God, it's so frustrating. Part of the problem is I'm huge on that. Like I love world building. I like it when the world makes sense and they show you things to try and flesh it out, make it feel bigger and deeper. And this world feels as like it's an inch deep. It's a puddle, and they've not fixed this problem. And it's one of the biggest problems I think season 1 had. And it's a problem that the Lord of the Rings films did not have at all, and they had way less time.
There's a scene where they're hiding in these ruins, and this guy goes, "Oh, these are ancient Numenorian ruins," and I'm like, "Excuse me, ancient Numenorian ruins? Like, what happened to this place that they abandoned?"
Yeah, because seriously, ancient. Wait, why did you? You're still around. Like, what's happening? Like, again, that's fine if we are seeing the Numenor has kind of already lost their status on the mainland. That's fine, because I guarantee there's been moments like that near the end of the Roman Empire where you see old Roman settlements from their height. But then you got to make me see that there are these kind of upstart kings, these petty kings, these people that Sauron can manipulate, maybe.
Yeah, like we got none of that.
At least there's a dwarf king. I mean, there's only the one and his son. There should be more, but
well,
other than Numenor,
do talk
there's
about the seven dwarf lords and stuff like that, but they don't. But we haven't.
We're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. Can I just say real quick? The music is much better. This is where I wrote this. I agree. The music's gotten a lot better. They have a theme running through, which is that one song at the end of the last season. Yeah, the sing. I think Fiona Apple sings in it. Which at least, and look, Bear McCreary is a very successful man. He doesn't need a note
singing
from me.
this song again.
I don't think so. No, I don't think she showed up. But he doesn't need a note from me. But I will say, at least the music is so much more memorable in this. It actually catches my attention, whereas it was just kind of not doing that at all the last season. So.
Well, this event here is one of the first of many contrivances that I have issues with in the show. So, literally, a lot of the events of this show occur. It's like weird story contrivances are written into it solely for the sake of creating moments to push the story in the direction that the show wants. So in this moment, a sea monster out of nowhere destroys the boat so that Sauron happens to be on this raft, so that he happens to run into Galadriel as she's full. That is so convenient. It's so convenient for that to occur. And then you might go, oh, well, maybe divine intervention. Why would the gods intervene on Sauron's behalf? to make it so that Galadriel can run into him.
And you know what? I can even forgive the contrivance of, oh, it just happened to do that, and she just happened to run into him. But really, the sea monster did all of that. The sea worm did all of that and didn't eat the guy sitting right in front of him. What's happening?
Yeah.
Like there's a morsel of food right in front of you. You're not going to take that? You thought the boat was food, I assume.
It's all because of sea worm.
See what
I would have hoped that he did that Chris Pratt thing from Jurassic World where he put his fingers out and he wooed the Velociraptor.
He pitched a
Would
woo.
have been better than what happened.
At least it was something. It just swims away.
And he's like, "Oh, you're evil like me. Bye." Anyway, he's on the raft and it's like, "Oh, look. What is it? Some moist tart floating in a river, distributing swords."
Distributing swords? It's not a
It's
basis of government.
And then we get the Rings of Power logo, and it's like, "Blah! Look at how awesome that was!" And it's like, it is not as cool as you think it is.
Hey.
I'd have to go back and look, but it seems like they may have refilmed that particular shot because I don't remember Halbrand giving that evil leer to Galadriel when he helped her up onto the raft.
Maybe
Probably not.
They have
It was
it
more from her
exhaust.
perspective.
I mean, probably not. If you ever saw the production stuff for the show, they literally built a giant tank room, filled it with water, so that they could do the raft scenes.
Almighty.
Yeah, no, they did that. This show has thrown inexhaustible amounts of money at production. You know what I
Worth
can say
every
for this
penny.
show? I'm sorry, Silver. What was that?
I just said worth every penny.
Worth every penny.
Very much.
You know what I could
That
say?
fish tank.
The CGI actually looks better season 2 than
Yeah.
season 1. Season 1
I
looked a
think
little
it does, too.
janky. Like the city shots looked faker in season 1, and season 2 they look a little bit cleaner this time around. I'm just
Yeah.
saying. Like somebody got better. Anyway, we open up to normal time with Elrond just buggering away from Galadriel. I
Yeah,
don't-
like they're teenagers. Like this is the strangest thing.
Well,
Give it
Yeah,
back.
Yeah, give it back, Elrond.
hey, this is another scene referencing other content. Hey guys, do you remember when Arwen was running away from the ring race and they were having this chase scene with the horse? I'm telling you, a lot of this show is basically winking and nodding at other things. Other shots, other moments, and other content. I think they were so cowed by what had happened before that most of this is basically like, we're just going to keep regurgitating stuff we know you like. Anyway, high-speed race. They make it to Gilgalad. And Gilgalad has some serious questions for Galadriel. Like, what in the hell have you been doing, woman? Literally, Sauron got all the way into our kingdom and was manipulating everybody. And you chose to withhold this information from Celebrimbor for some obscure reason, which will cause untold amounts of terrible things to happen in future content from this point out. Literally,
Millions of
everything that's happened is the fault of Galadriel. It was all her doing. It is her prideful, psychotic, narcissistic, I'm going to do whatever I want to attitude that is going to cause all of these things to happen. And basically, she doesn't want, I guess this chase is to stop him from telling, this is a bad look for her at the moment, is to stop her from telling Gilgalad that, hey, you screwed up Galad. What was she going to do if she caught him? Beat the shit out of him to stop him from telling?
Yeah.
She was trying to get the rings back from him.
Well, clearly, but you
Which-
see my point.
Yeah,
like,
I
take
do.
the
I do
rings, like,
see your point.
Okay. Then she would
That's-
just be in the same position Elrond is in.
Yes, because Elrond would still
Right.
tell on her.
Well,
He's gonna
can
tell
I,
Papa
can I,
Elf.
not to derail, but
Okay.
it is something that, because there has been, and I can't remember where the article is from, I'm sorry, but I know there's been talk about the hut shipping action with Sauron, played by Charlie Vickers, and Galadriel, played by Morfydd Clark here. And it's been mentioned in some articles prior to season 2 releasing here. And did you notice that she was like, well, like when he's like, what happened? Like, how did you, like, did you really not, like, you've been looking for him for 1,000 years and you couldn't figure that out? She's like, well, he came to me in a fair form. Like, oh, did he? Like, Rhett, I am terrified of what they're going to do for the rest of the season. I am so scared.
Did she say like hot people can't be bad? Is that what she said?
Yeah, I mean, so she's like, well, he was good looking. I didn't know. It's like, what, ma'am, you are, like, oh my god, how dumb can you be?
Has a quote where she said she feels that there's a connection between her and Halbrand's character.
Yeah.
That this is sparked, literally, I think the only people watching this are people who are hyper shipping Galadriel and Halbrand.
Which is going to be hard to do in this season, I think, because I don't know when he's ever going to be around her.
Silver, what is it about women that love that, like, shipping the bad guy? Like, I can change him. What's going on?
I can fix him.
I could fix him.
As resident woman, Val.
I don't know. Maybe it's like a star-crossed lovers thing. Like that fantasy. I don't know.
Girls get tingling in their nethers at the idea of the bad guy and the lady protagonist getting together. Like, the guy could be a murderous psychopath, and they're like, I think I could fix him. Let's get him together. It's like, excuse me? Why are we trying to save the Dark Lord of Evil?
Yeah, it's not like he's even a bad guy. He's literally just like a devil. Like he's one of Satan's helpers. Like, what the fuck? Okay.
Yeah. He's the inheritor of hell.
Yeah, like wow, weird, but okay, sure.
Well, Google Ad demands answers. And Morfydd feels emotionally, oh no, I have to admit I super screwed up. And he's like, you better tell me.
Like a teenager who got caught smoking weed.
Yeah. And she's like, oh, I guess it's
only
Sauron.
It was only that.
I guess it's Sauron.
Ba-dum-bum. Oh my god. And then there was the line, I will not stop until he is stopped. And it's like, did you learn nothing?
Yeah.
Like, what? We just had this problem last season that you were supposed to learn from. Like,
that's why we're here.
Oh my god.
You chose to let him go.
Like, my lord. I don't.
I won't stop until I catch the man I let go willingly.
Hey, what's character development? I don't know. It doesn't exist in this show. Like, certainly not for Galadriel. She's dumb as hell.
And you know what?
Really wants those rings.
Elrond comes across as the only sane person in these first 3 episodes. He's literally like, he worked with Celebrimbor for weeks. We don't know what he did to the rings. We can't trust it. You're all in trouble. And then there's this conversation of, we better run. But so here's a confusing contrivance. I don't have a contrivance, but sort of leap of logic. So we better start leaving Middle Earth because I guess the elves are in decline. Now we have to have the rings because Sauron's back. We have to stay to stop him from destroying the Middle Earth.
Oh yeah, elves never cared before.
Well, now that it's worse because Sauron's confirmed to be around, now that it's worse, we can't leave, is essentially his logic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
if we leave, we're leaving man to their own devices, and they'll never be able to overcome Sauron on their own. So we have to stay. So we have to use the rings. Even though maybe the ring, Sauron did something to the rings, and if we use the rings, we may be playing right into his hands.
And
See, this is
Elrond's
one of the reasons why they should have followed the lore in making the Elven Rings last.
Yeah.
well, and
Well, 'cause
Elrond's
wouldn't it
sitting
make
here
sense-
going, "This is a bad
Oh, go
idea."
ahead,
Sorry, Ross.
No, you're good. Because I mean, look, I don't know why in the lore that the Elven Rings were last, and you can tell me, but I will say this. I would play it off as like, man, look at all this chaos that has happened because of these power-hungry humans and dwarves. We need rings of powers to help prevent the, kind of like a mutually assured destruction thing, or that's not right, but like like after World War II, when the U.S. was the only one with nukes, where it's like, we are the rulers of this land, like we are the only ones with this power, like trying to like keep the children from fighting. Like you could have done that, like shown the chaos that all this has caused and why the elves need their own balance against that, but
Now that
instead
nukes
it
have
just
been
makes them seem
introduced.
really stupid. Yeah, it just makes them seem dumb as hell.
So the 7 dwarven rings and the 9 human rings were made with the assistance of Sauron, and those were basically test rings, sort of like developmental rings as they got better at creating more powerful rings. The elven rings were made in secret without Sauron's input by Celebrimbor on his own, separate.
They kind of figured out what Sauron was doing with the rings, that he was tainting them, because he was helping make the 7 and the 9.
Right.
And so when they figured that out, it was like you said, they figured that the elves needed their own to counteract what Sauron was doing. So Celebrimbor, in secret, made the 3.
So
So
had a
the
great
thing
scene
is
where he's
that
in desperation in his forge, maybe
Yeah.
some soot on his face, like just desperate and panting and sweaty. Now instead he just looks like a big dummy.
yeah. See it was kind of that thing where Sauron must have known that the elves had rings, but he didn't know how many or what their powers were or anything like that, because they were done without his knowledge or oversight or interference or anything like that. So there could have been any number.
Well, the biggest problem is that because they were made in the way that Sauron had devised, that they were subject to the one ring, which he inevitably is going to have to make. So when he finally makes that ring and puts it on, all of the elves have to remove theirs, because even though they were made without Sauron's assistance, they would be controlled essentially by Sauron if he has the one ring, which is the catalyst that eventually is going to have to come down the road in this show. At any rate, well, because Ross asked about why the Elven Rings were made last, it's because they were made without Sauron's input.
Gotcha.
After the fact. Anyway, Elrond is trying to have a reasonable argument with it. He's like, we can't trust the rings. Literally, the Dark Lord of Evil has involved himself in the creation of these things. We can't trust it. And Gil-galad's only retort is, I'm the king. You don't get the say in what happens. This is above your privilege.
He does that. He wags his finger at him.
He wags his finger at him. And of course Morfydd's into this because she's like, obey him. Because she wants the rings to be a thing. And the only sane person in the whole show jumps off a cliff.
Yeah, he does.
He's like,
He gone.
bye. I've got your stupid rings.
God.
Well, here's one of the confusing elements of the story that feels like this was changed in between season 1 and season 2. And you might ask,
this makes no sense.
Well, you might ask, what are you talking about? So Sauron shows up as Halbrand and gets himself captured so that he can talk to Adar and try and convince him that he knows about Sauron, even though he's Sauron, and where Sauron is, to go after Sauron.
It makes no sense.
And you know what's so weird is like they knew he was who he was, like the orcs knew who he was before they got to Adar. But how would that be? Did any, like, I guess some of those orcs got away, but like they wouldn't know who he is, right? Now Adar would.
Right.
And so that tells me that he walked out and was like, I am the king of these people and lands. take me to your like. Why would you do that? Like, what is wrong with
Take
you?
me to your leader.
Like, what's happening? It's so dumb.
So we are
Clearly,
30,
that's not going to go well.
we're 30 minutes into the show, and I already know what the rest of the season's going to look like based upon this conversation. Because he's essentially lying to Adar, saying Sauron is hidden up in Eregion, and Adar is worried of Sauron's return. So he's basically manipulating Adar into gathering the orcs and attacking Eregion, which is what's going to be the big battle later on in this season. Like, we already know what's going to happen in this show before it happens, and that's going to be the rest of the season. Like, based upon the first 30 minutes of episode 1. That basically he's just manipulating him and going to attack where Celebrimbor is.
God, at least he's a manipulator now, not just a being dragged along by Galadriel.
By Galadriel's psychopathic motivation.
My lord.
And that's essentially what this conversation is he basically says, I have information about Sauron. And he's like, no, you don't. I'll torture you. And he's like, you can't, because you won't get the information. And he's like, I super can. And they have this awkward conversation. And then we get the most beloved element of this the show that everyone's talking about. We get an orc that's not super into war.
Yeah, he doesn't want to go fight. No. Orcs don't like that.
He's like, we don't need to war anymore. Are you sure? And it's like, no, we do. I'm your dad and I know best.
Your dad.
I'm your dad. Wow.
To reference back to the intro that Red had for the episode today, it makes me like this whole thing, and we'll talk about this further in episode 3. But with trying to paint the orcs this way, it's like somebody saw the Rankin and Bass Return of the King and that song "Where There's a Whip, There's a Way," and they thought, oh, but the orcs, they don't want to go to war. And it's like, yeah, they're. First of all, that's just a cute song and a cute animated movie for children. But number 2, even if that's, we could see in the Lord of the Rings films and in the books or whatever, like they are contentious. They are contentious people. Like they're always griping and getting pissed off at each other and fighting and whatever. That doesn't mean they don't want to go whoop ass. That just means they want to do. Oh, I want to be in charge.
Well, they want victims.
Usually the whip isn't used to get them into battle. It's to keep them going the same direction.
Exactly. It's to keep them organized. Like otherwise, it's herding cats because they're big dumb idiots. Like I don't.
It feels like the Warhammer orcs were done so much better because their motive is we like to war. And for
literally,
reason,
this is life.
For some reason, Lord of the Rings or Rings of Power is motivated to make the orcs have family values and want to settle down and do. Well, let's set that aside until we get to that moment.
Yeah,
but
we'll get there. Yeah.
But here's the stranger, not Gandalf, wandering through the desert. Well, I think that was his dream. Was that his dream? Looking at sticks?
That was his dream.
He's the burning bush. Staff out in the desert.
Anyway, he has dreams of sticks. Then here he is with Nori, whose name I nearly forgot. She seems skinnier and older.
Yeah,
like her
2
face
years is a long
seems
time
different.
when you're her age.
2 years is a bit of difference for her.
You see that with Theo later too, by the way.
Yes,
He
despite the
is
fact
not
he still
14
has a
anymore.
little boy bob haircut.
Yeah, it's a little more emo now. It's not quite so bobby, but it's still it's funny.
I'm going to be honest. Most of the Nori, not Gandalf stuff,
It sucks.
There's nothing here. They do
Yeah,
almost nothing.
The best part of this part is when you see the people tracking them, and that's a cool character design.
Yeah, the mask. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the part. Hey, all right. Oh, and it's gone.
Yep.
The people of
man,
Rome.
this sucks.
And as much as
we
complain about diversity in these shows and people being like, well, first of all, it's not lore accurate. Second of all, it doesn't make any logical sense for everything to be as diverse as like a modern city. Like that makes just no logical sense. But there were actually other races in Lord of the Rings that Tolkien wrote into it. And they would be these people of Rune who I guarantee you are not going to be brown. They're going to be white people.
Yeah.
who should be more Arab looking.
Yeah, we should be having a good tan going.
Because they're in the desert.
Ugh.
Because people living in the desert would have darker skin because that's how melanin works. Anyway. They desperately need
I wish they
food.
would've-
He tries to summon
I
food
wish they
from a
would've shown,
tree. Bugs
like
come
parts
out.
of dried wood stuck in his skin when it explodes. Like he just shrapnels himself. That would have been awesome. Instead,
Set off a
spiders
magic nuke.
or beetles, rather.
Yeah, well, clearly it's setting up that he needs some sort of device, perhaps, to focus his power. Anyway, they get bugs.
What is Wizard without stick?
Hey, you need stick.
Yeah.
This whole thing seems like a massive waste of time to be like, I'm super strong. I can't control my power. I need stick. We eat bug.
You could have cut this out and just had it in that late. I think it's the next episode or maybe the third, or where they
Well,
cut
I
that
think the
moment.
Harfoot stuff has no bearing on the plot whatsoever. You could have cut it out season 1 and 2, and it wouldn't have changed the story one bit. Would have been exactly the same. Well, to be fair, I thought of one thing that would have changed, and they wouldn't have seen it when they yeeted Gandalf from heaven, because other people saw that. So that's one thing they did.
Yeah,
it
yeah.
did affect the rest of the world, as people saw it happen.
Yeah.
Other than that,
Well,
has
I think
no
this all
bearing.
stems from the Game of Thrones jumping perspective, and but at the time, at least, they figured, well, not only do we have these books to go off of, but we have the original writer helping us. This is all going to tie together. And
Yeah,
oh my, did that not tie together so well? But anyway,
They're going to have it tie together later somehow. Gandalf is the stranger, I should say, excuse me, is going to come into it somehow. But one of the things that about the whole, sending Gandalf or sending the stranger from Valinor to Middle Earth that doesn't make a darn bit of sense at all is they had boats that could go back and forth between Valinor and the shore of Middle Earth with no problem.
We've had this conversation, Jason.
I know.
Season 1.
No, we must
went
fire
through this
catapult him.
whole thing where why in the world would they yeet him from heaven and then him lose all of his memory? Like, why would you send an emissary from the gods who then doesn't remember anything and doesn't have the capacity to know what he was trying to do? We get, like, obviously, this is a huge problem. See season 1 reviews.
Funny.
Because it's funny. Duh.
Hello.
Anyway, Halbrand is hanging out as prisoner.
This is the Roger Rabbit style of filmmaking. We did it because it was funny.
Yes.
And everybody's favorite hero, Waldreg, returning from season 1, who was the one that put the evil sword in the stone that caused Mount Doom to erupt.
God, I love it. My favorite heroin addict.
Yeah, this is the guy. He's our hero. Anyway, Waldreg's sitting here like, here, tell me, and then I'll get more status with Adar. And he's like, no. Yeah, that was most of that conversation. Anyway, Halbrand gets the
Time to
meat,
train a warg.
and apparently he can woo the warg by Chris Pratting his way through the animals.
Orcs a bridge
Can't
too
do
far.
that with the orcs.
Orcs a bridge too far.
It's a bridge
Oh,
too
here we
far.
are at this tiny place. Hey, I wonder what's going on here. Oh, look, it's Círdan.
I like how he had to show this woman how to use a plane, like a pole. God, I forgot what those are called. I think they're called pole plane. But it's like, oh, perfection. It's like, ma'am, you made the first stroke. What are you doing? Like, what are you talking about? Only in Valinor.
Only.
Well,
Just as a reference, Círdan is the oldest elf in Middle Earth. Perhaps one of the oldest elves ever, to the point where he is one of the only elves that grows facial hair.
oh.
So he
that's-
is lore accurate here, which is
Yeah.
surprising.
Yeah.
All the things to get right.
Yeah. Of course, they do have to make a point of showing a scene where he's shaving.
Which is so dumb. Why did you introduce this bearded elf and then have him shave in the next time we see him.
Well, they have to introduce this guy for the ring because he's going to have one in the lore.
Well, yeah.
Anyway, here's Círdan. Elrond buggered off to go talk to Círdan because Círdan's older and wiser than Gil-galad. Maybe he can convince him. So he's like, here's the rings. I mean, it feels like stuff is happening, but nothing happens. Anyway,
No.
he gives him the ring. Yes, Jason.
Yeah, I was gonna keep going. It's something that comes up later. So
anyway, he gives him the rings, and he's like, "We need to destroy it." And Círdan's like, "There's an underwater volcano or something." Anyway, we're back to we're back to Gil-galad basically going, "Hey, we need to send word to Celebrimbor because you forgot to tell him, Galadriel, that Sauron is manipulating everybody. You psychotic, horrible woman.
Because you didn't want to get in trouble.
Because you didn't want consequences." What is that? What is that? What is that movie? Freaking. It's a romance movie with freaking 1989 Joker. What's his name? Jack Nicholson.
Oh, Jack Nicholson.
When they ask him, how do you write women so well? As good as it gets.
Oh, right.
And he asked him, some lady asked him, how do you write women so well? And he's like, I think of a man, I remove logic and accountability.
Yeah, reason and accountability.
And accountability. And that's Galadriel. She gets no accountability for the actions she takes.
Nope.
No.
Certainly no reason.
Anyway, they're having this conversation and she starts making like demands. And he's literally like, I should cast you out for what you've done. You psychotic woman. Which is a comeuppance that she deserves. She deserves being yelled at for the horrible decision making that she's made.
Yep.
She should be thrown from a cliff and gotten rid of.
And on top of that, demonstrating she's learned nothing. She's already going like, well, I'm the only one who can really know. And everyone has to look at her and be like, yeah, you got bamboozled. Like, we're not sending you out again. Like, what's wrong with you?
She's even somewhat defiant to the High King of the Elves.
Ugh, she's so unlikable. I mean, she's such an ass. And later in this episode, she's still such an ass. God almighty. They've of all the things to fix between the two seasons, and this is one they didn't do.
To be fair, it feels like they've had her cast a softer countenance because she came across as so awful that her her acting face-wise comes across softer. Despite the fact verbally she still is somewhat defiant. And Gil-galad, by all rights, is like, I should throw you out.
Yeah, you're gone.
Yeah. Anyway,
this is where she basically is like, well, Elrond would go talk to somebody about this. He would talk to somebody who he respects and he thinks is wise, and that's when they come up with the shipwright.
Right.
I like how they didn't it took that to realize, oh, he went to somebody else to go hide them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's like 10 elves in the whole world apparently, and you didn't think he'd go to one of them? Okay. Sure.
Well, he's talking to Círdan, and he's like, this is bad, and Sauron has touched these. Yeah, and he's talking Círdan into making decisions about what happened to these rings. And suddenly, here they are. Now, here's what's such a strange thing. So they're in the Grey Havens. Where is Lindon? I'm looking at my map. Does anyone recall where Lindon is? Is Lindon nearby the Grey Havens?
County? Salt Lake County?
I don't think so.
No.
No clue.
Of course, this is like a third age map, and we're in the second age. I'm just surprised how fast they got there. I don't know the distance involved. It could be
apparently
nearby.
elves are really good at swimming.
Apparently they are good at swimming.
because he swam there. Elrond swam there.
Ron swam there. Well, here they are. She comes to talk to him. And she's like, we have to trust the rings. And he's like, no. It's like, this is a bad idea.
Bitch, are you for real?
Well, it's funny. She has a moment where she goes, I did what I feel was right. And it's like, Elrond's like, yeah, so did I.
And which one of us got tricked by Sauron because he's pretty?
Well, but that's not an excuse for your actions. And it's like, I went and stabbed a guy. Why did you do that? Oh, I did what I think was right.
Yeah, well.
And then the judge would be like, well, that's fair. Like, I don't.
You know what? He's right. That's fair.
He was so brave.
I can't argue with that.
So brave. Stunning, even.
Brave and stunning. Where Círdan heads off, and it's like, oh, we're back to the stranger. And they're like, someone's following us. And he leaves a trap. He leaves a trap to give her, to catch this person.
Hey,
which
I have
involves
a
a
question.
rock and a string. Yes,
Who would
Ross?
fall for this? You could see the rope lying there. What kind of nearsighted moron wouldn't see? Like, you'd stop and be like, "Is that a snake?" Oh no, it's a string, it's a rope. Wait,
Well,
who put that there?
Harfoots are meant to be pretty clever.
Yeah.
Well, because otherwise they die. Not this one.
No. Well, look at this
Look
trap.
at it.
How is this
Yeah,
meant to
it's not
trip
a
anybody?
Snake. What the
They could have just covered it with some dust from the trail a little
And-
bit.
Literally, just have an insert scene of him of dirty hands putting dust on the rope.
Yeah.
This
Well,
makes
what-
her look like such a dunce.
Wouldn't she just drag these rocks? It's just a string between rocks.
Yeah, especially with her big old feet. Ugh.
Hey everybody, it's not Samwise Gamgee. Come to assist in their journey.
Oh, thank God.
Well, so this is another one of those moments where it's like, okay, this has to be a rewrite after season 1. Where they got rid of Poppy, she goes off on her own, and then she shows up later. It's like, why wouldn't she just leave with him? She's like, well, I have to go with my friend. That's because they changed their minds afterwards, and they're like, well, we need to have Poppy follow. That's the
I
only
guarantee
reason
you
why.
they got into the writing room and realized that the dynamic is much better if you have 2 hobbits with this weird unknown wizard.
Right.
Because otherwise it's just you're either going to hate Nori for constantly doubting him, or you're going to think she's a moron for always believing him. So you got to have an interplay. I guarantee that's what happened. They got into the writing room and went, oh shit. Like, that's why the Hobbit works, because you have the dwarves being grumblers, or you have the dwarves believing him and Bilbo grumbling. Like, you can't, like, if you have just the one, it really sucks.
Yeah, this is a writing change after season 1.
Yeah.
I guarantee there's
100%.
no lore reason for her to not have gone with her at the end of season 1.
It's
And
not
then
like she
to
has
just
family.
show
They mentioned that
up
in the
later.
first season. They're all dead. And I can
Yeah.
see why she couldn't see a snake in front of her.
Remember when they
But,
all laughed at her dead family?
Oh my god,
Oh
dude.
gosh.
The Harfoots are brutal. What a terrible society.
When
No
they
wonder
were
she
telling
left.
stories about the stupid ways people die, and everybody laughed about how her family died.
Look at how they died
You're
in
an
a
orphan.
rock fall or something.
Oh.
Well, gosh, there was another. Did anyone think it odd? It's like someone's been following us. It's like, well, she followed. Like, she has no reason to sneak along. It almost felt like a little bit of a Gollum thing, where
Well,
it's like
you know what that
someone's
is?
following and we gotta
That's-
catch him.
That's because didn't Samwise did that. No, sir.
Gollum.
I'm going with you, Mr. Mr. Frodo. Oh,
Yeah,
Drop
he
the
did.
leaves,
He's
Yeah,
sir.
he did that.
Oh,
sneaking
Mr.
outside
Frodo.
the building. It's just why
Yeah.
would she
But
also
also-
follow? Wouldn't she just present herself? She wants them to know.
Right.
hey guys,
It
I'm
could
here.
It could be that they were realizing that the people of Rune were tracking them, and they just happened to set the trap, and Poppy.
Well, that's
tricked
what it wants you to think, but then it kind of implies that she was the one the whole time. Because why would a person from Rune be setting up a fire if they were tracking these people? Whereas
That's
she
true.
is a known moron. So I think it's trying to say, oh, it was her the whole time. And that's why they're like not concerned later in a different episode when a certain bell's ringing 1 billion times. I just don't. Of course, anyway. Whatever. It's so stupid. Maybe it's supposed to mirror that part in Fellowship when Frodo's taking the boat out by himself. He's like, "No, Sam, I have to do this on my own."
You're not wrong.
Oh,
That's
Mr.
very
Frodo.
possible.
Of course you do,
Yeah.
Mr. Frodo, and I'm coming with you.
Mr. Frodo.
She shows up with a sort of MacGuffin, and she's like, "Oh, by the way, I have this map, so we know where we're going."
Because apparently this big
Because they were
tall idiot's
lost.
a big idiot.
Well, they could have literally had all of these moments at the end of season 1. I'm going with you, and then one of the leaders that said, "Well, if you're going that direction,
Here,
you should
this
take a
map."
map," and that's all we needed.
Yep. Anything.
Why are we wasting time with this?
Well, and they kind of mentioned that they're going in circles, and
Yeah.
but they sort of try to imply it's magic. But the thing is, the kind of desert that you do that in is not the kind of desert that they're in.
Right.
That has like hills and features. It's meant to be in like the middle of Saudi Arabia desert. Like those are the kind of ones that you can do
Completely
circles
flat.
in. Yeah,
No
just sand.
landmarks.
Like God.
You mentioned that before, where it's like, there are features, there are landmarks. Why would they be getting lost?
Yeah, it's just
Exactly.
crazy to me. Like maybe I'm biased because I'm from a desert that looks just like that, and it's like, yeah, it's not hard. Like you're not in a sea of sand. Like there's stuff you could see. Like it's not moving. Like a windstorm doesn't change that. Like what do you? Okay,
You walk
So-
that way.
maybe they're really trying to imply it is magic, which is even stranger. But whatever.
Oh, by the way,
Right.
just for reference, this is the Sea of Rune, and this river leading up over here is the Iron Hills in these mountains up here. To
Ah.
anyone who cares, the Iron Hills
I care.
basically you go farther left this way, and you're going to have sort of like Esgaroth and Erebor, like the Lonely Mountain and the
Yeah.
Right.
Mirkwood.
Because the Iron Hills is where the people from the Lonely Mountain retreat to, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So just to reference what's going on here. Anyway, he's been dreaming about this rock, and he's like, "Hey, we're kind of at this rock, and we got Rune people following us." And here's Círdan having a contemplative boat ride, and then he sees the rocks, and he's like, "Oh, these are some hot stones. These are some sexy
This
rings,
is
you
the-
guys."
They're
This
so
is the part
tacky.
where it made no. This scene made no sense. Because we knew the elves were going to use the rings, but they weren't going to be tossed in. So either he was going to not throw the rings in, or he didn't have the rings to begin with, that they were somewhere else. Because it's not like they're going to toss them in and then be like, "Oh, whoops, let's send someone down." Because he said that the trench that he was going to toss him in was so deep, no one was going to be able to get the rings back. So
Well,
this
I
scene
saw-
doesn't even make any sense.
I saw a review of this show that sort of concisely puts a lot of the problems that this show has. Is that we're basically watching events where we know what the conclusion is. So they're sort
Right.
of backfilling story going backwards based upon events we know where they're going to end up at. And because of that, the way they write it, it feels like a lot of the characters don't have their own agency, or they don't make their
Yeah.
own decisions, that things just sort of play out in order to come up to the ultimate story that the conclusion has to go to. So it's like he goes out like he's going to destroy them, but we know he's not gonna. So we know any of the moments here with the decision making of this character has no bearing because he's going to
Yeah.
make a certain decision.
Yeah. It
So
has
it-
no
it-
impact. It has
Well,
no.
it feels
no
like the
force on
characters have
story.
no agency.
Yeah.
And people might argue back, like, well, the prequels did it for Star Wars, and I would go, yep, and they sucked. So, like, the biggest problem was the story and why characters did the things they did.
Well, anyway, not much is happening. Adar comes to talk to Halbrand, and he's like, I'll let your people go. And then Sauron's like, and then he's like, where's Sauron? And he's like, I don't know. And then he's like, I know he's going to be. And then he's like, well, why did I free you? Why are we making a deal? And he's like, well, he's going to be a Regian. So this is all setting up the, I'm going to tell you where Sauron is so you can go kill him. Come battle me. Oh, by the way, Adar is new guy because he's been replaced because the old guy left.
This whole I vow to serve the Lord of Mordor. He's in his mind going,
Yeah.
it's gonna be
Well,
me.
yeah, they thought they
Yeah.
were being clever. It's like,
Yeah.
vow to me, and he's like, I vow to serve the Lord of Mordor. It's like, oh,
Which, I mean, it works. Whatever. It's a little eye rolly, but
Yeah.
Compared to everything else, my lord, it's downright clever.
They just think they're being clever. Waldreg is murdered. The hero Waldreg, who started.
By trained.
Finally got that dude.
He
How come
started
we
all
saw
of
the warg
this.
rip out the guts of a random elf, but not Waldreg?
Yeah. Anyway, they're all like having a good party, an elven party, which are not exciting parties.
They're mourning the loss of this magical tree.
Yeah. Círdan shows up and he's like, I'm not going to toss him. And Elrond's like, you douche. Anyway,
No.
they all get rings, and Galadriel is chosen because someone dropped it and it just kind of rolled in her direction.
Can I just emphasize how tacky these rings are? These are so...
They're not good looking rings.
Fuck,
They're pretty
ugly.
ugly.
No, they're awful. They look like they came out of a gumball machine. Like, what is
They're
this?
Yeah,
They're the
I
ring
got
pops
these
of
at the
power.
dentist.
I mean, honestly. Oh my god! All this money, and that's what you can't. I mean, I get you want them to be distinct, but my god, go to some bespoke jeweler.
I think this is
No.
We need 3 rings that you would think Elven kings would wear. I think I can get these out of a gachapon in Japan. Here, give me
Give me
500
$30,000.
yen.
No,
So-
those
so-
are from the prize box at the dentist when you've brushed them.
You've been so good with your flossing.
well, it's like they've made a
Here, have a ring
clear
pop of power.
they've clearly stated, we don't trust you, you psychopath woman. All of this is your fault, but we're going to let you hold one of the greatest weapons in Middle Earth because it rolled in your direction.
Here, have a nuke
Yeah, it's
on
fine.
us.
So they put on
Seriously.
the rings.
We talked about this a little bit before. This should have been a point where they said, Galadriel, you don't get this until you prove you're worth the risk here,
Mhm.
rather than just like, you know what? Go ahead, take it.
They
It's
spend
fine.
time dressing her down and just to let her hold essentially Middle Earth's equivalent of a nuke.
Yeah, she's holding the football.
She's holding the football.
Yeah, they gave the nuclear football to a guy that just got out of Leavenworth.
So it feels like they set this soul scene up because we saw this in Lord of the Rings so that they can have that,
Yeah.
Hey, it looks familiar.
Uh-huh.
that
Exactly.
God, I
visual
wish the
moment
rings
where
looked
they're
better.
all holding the rings together. Be like, look, check out our jewelry, I guess.
Hey, speaking of visuals, not to nitpick, sorry Amazon, but wouldn't you want to take the rings off Gilgalad's hands so it looks a little bit less busy
No.
and more like, hey, this is the ring?
No.
Is his the one in
No,
the
no,
middle?
fine.
No, see, exactly.
No clue.
I'm pretty sure yes.
He's really into ring pops. He collects them.
Yeah.
He's got many
He's
kinds.
got a whole set.
I heard somebody make a comment about the scene of like, this is not how men wear rings and show them off. They don't hold their hands out like this. I don't know if that's a little bit nitpicky, but
Yeah.
it feels like this scene is specifically built to recreate that moment in the movie.
Yeah.
It would have been
Everybody-
perfect if they had like the bent wrist, like, check out my jewelry.
Well, what's he gonna do? Like hold it in a fist like he just won the Super Bowl? Like that's not very becoming of a king.
Oh yeah, the
Pop
championship
towards
ring.
you, hands up.
Yeah, like
Give each other a fist bump.
Like,
He has to show his penis power by fist bumping the other people.
oh yeah, he does. Clink the rings.
I like how this whole time Elrond is sitting there horrified at the
Yeah,
event
just like
straight-
no.
But if essentially putting the rings on
Biden's
did
neck.
exactly what they hoped it would do, it restored the tree from Valinor, and it's fixing
So
all of the
pretty.
problems.
Yep.
So
Oh.
there's some
Yeah,
important
tree.
elements. I did fix it. There's some important elements to address in this scene specifically. So, in the lore, Elrond is basically taking Galadriel's place. Because in the lore, Galadriel didn't trust Anatar, didn't trust Sauron or the many forms of him. She didn't trust the ring nonsense. And she was like, we shouldn't be trusting this. And Elrond is essentially taking her place in this show, where he's basically the only one standing there going, we shouldn't be doing this, you guys. This is a bad idea. Like, what are we doing? But how are you going to convince him now that this works? And Elrond just looks horrified. He's like, this is awful. This is a bad idea. Well, we get Celebrimbor, and he's in his awesome room, and Halbrand shows up. And he's like, I'm here to talk to Celebrimbor. And they're like, no. And that's the end of the episode. Final thoughts on episode 1.
I'm
So far,
glad it
not
was
so
over.
good.
First
Yeah,
episode was rough.
Silver, why don't you give me your little assessment? We had what the goo monster Sauron,
Right.
and we had rings
Being
doesn't make
betrayed,
any
prison
sense.
shanking.
prison shanking Sauron. What do you think, Silver? Having just watched it today
Just-
because of your negligence.
Yeah. Yeah. So just right off the bat with episode 1, you mentioned it earlier, like, oh, they rewrote it to put, Poppy into that scene to bring her into the adventure with the stranger and Nori. That's what this whole thing feels like. I have a feeling that's going to be the entirety of the rest of the season. It's like, oh, we didn't have a plan for this. What if we did this and this? And like, oh, we'll change this. No one will notice. It'll be fine.
I think they had a plan for it. I think they threw the plan away when they got such strong backlash from the first season, and now it
Yeah.
feels like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It feels like a rewrite. It definitely does.
Yeah.
Super.
Yeah, stuff feels off in a way that's hard to explain.
I mean, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just
Well,
trying to bide myself time.
Well, it feels like, I don't know if you would agree, Silver. It feels like the show is less cringe than season 1, but it's really just as bad, if not worse, when it comes to the writing. Because season 1 was majorly cringy. It feels less cringy this time around. Like they heard complaints, and it's like, oh, everybody hates Galadriel, who you're supposed to love. So they're like, well, we need to give her a talking to. But it's like, if everybody didn't respond so negatively to Galadriel, would anyone have given her a talking to? Would anyone recognize her horrifically bad decision making by season 2? I wonder whether or not that would happen at all. I don't think they wrote her expecting us to dislike her. I think we were supposed to love her character.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
It,
but I think they
it's-
didn't change her enough.
she was so beloved from when Kate Winslet was portraying her that I think that everybody just figured that when they portrayed her in The Rings of Power, we just all jump on the Galadriel bandwagon. And when there was so much pushback against her, that's when they're scrambling and they're being like, oh well, we need to show that she's been chastened, that she is been humbled. And that she's not the same person that she is. And they've done that somewhat, but at this point it's like, well, we don't really care because we don't like her.
Ross, final thoughts?
My hopes were low, and they were shattered even further. I had some hope after the end of season 1, and this just, even that first episode, I was just like, oh my god, it just all these choices they make, I don't understand. Both the characters but especially in the production, the writing, whatever, that are just dumb, and they make everything feel not right or make the characters feel stupid. I mean, we're kind of back where we were, just different. And I hated this episode. It was real rough.
Sweet. Well, we're not going to dwell too long because obviously this released in 3 episodes, so expect episode 2 shortly. We're going to pretend like there's a cut, but clearly we're moving into the next discussion. But we'll see you guys next time in episode 2.
If you like the show, follow Rhett, Jason, Ross, and Silver, the world's most lethally stupid internet personalities, on Twitter at DG Podcast or on Instagram at Distracted Gamers. If you liked or hated what you heard here today, you can email them at thedistractedgamers@gmail.com and share your feelings. Not that Jason would care, since he hasn't any, of course.
Oh my God, it's so juicy.